Well, it's a new year, but unfortunately, it's the same question. The idea of raising the March Madness tournament field to 96 teams, 90 teams, 126 teams. There's a lot of different scenarios here. Of course, this gets approached once or twice a year, it seems like, where people come out with articles. What I saw yesterday was College Game Day, ESPN College Game Day, talking about this, and you can see they gave an even mock scenario of bubble teams. This is only the 96 team field, just how weak the bubble is with LSU, Maryland, Washington, Virginia Commonwealth, all just nowhere close to being good enough to make a tournament. George Mason is actually a decent team. I wouldn't mind George Mason being in the tournament. Cornell, a decent Ivy League school. Miami's had a really bad year. So just the gist, the general vibe of the idea of a 96 team field, it would have to be out of desperation. We know that the NCAA relies on March Madness heavily in terms of college basketball. It is by far the most popular time of year. And it's not surprising. It's the playoff type format with March Madness, with how crazy it is. The playoffs in every sport get the most ratings, but with college basketball, it's even more lopsided, with the regular season seemingly cared about a lot less than, let's just say, the college football regular season. I do think if they did expand the tournament, it's just so unlikely because the tournament becomes a completely conjumbled mess. Let's see, this was a proposal. I mean, this has been going back to the early 2000s. I saw an article when I was looking this up from 2010 about expanding the tournament to 96 teams. Eliminate the NIT, which saves expenses. Yeah, the NIT is not going to draw great ratings, that's for sure. Eliminate the first four in Dayton. I never liked the first four just in general because it's not a clean feel. So when it comes to like March Madness, we love filling out the brackets, but you're always dealing with those 2-11 seeds. You don't know who's going to win, who's even going to be in the matchup with the 6 seed. The 16 seeds aren't clean. I want a clean field of 64 teams where I know every team that's going to be in the field of 64. I always never liked the first four in general, but here obviously you would eliminate the first four if you're expanding the tournament by like over 20 teams. The 32 automatic qualifiers would not participate in the Madness before the Madness. They would automatically be seeded in the resulting 64-team bracket. So for the top 32 overall seeds, it would be just normal for them. It would be like it's a normal 64-team tournament. You're not worrying about the first part of it, which will get you down to 64 teams. They would automatically receive a bye into the actual 64-team tournament. The remaining field, which would consist of 64 of the best at-large teams as deemed by the selection committee, and the criteria would remain the same. At-larges 33 through 64 would be seeded via the S-curve, avoiding teams from the same conference playing in the Madness before the Madness. The idea is 33 through 96 would all participate in games. The winners would be seeded into the field of 64. That would be the idea with this format. So the only good thing with this format, if you are good enough to be one of the top 32 teams, I'm not sure about the auto qualifiers. I'm guessing if you win your conference, they'll let you in. You know, that's just my speculation. And then they would also choose, obviously, at-large teams. But in general, those teams, you know, the tournament would be as normal, just like a normal 64-team tournament. Everything would be seeded 1 through 16 and yada, yada, yada. These games will be in home venues. Wow, so before the actual tournament, the games to get into the tournament would be in home venues of the higher seeded team. This reminds me a lot of the 12-team playoff a little bit. It kind of does. Just, I mean, obviously there are a lot more tournament games in March Madness than there is for the college football playoff, but it's the same criteria where you have an extra round that the top 4 seeds don't compete in, but there's on-campus games, and these games would be on campus. Madness before the Madness games will fill into the 8v9 and 7v10 games in the bracket, and then there's a sample of the bracket as well, and you can just see some different samples of how it could potentially look like. I don't know, to me it's pretty confusing. It's just a complete mess. This is a format where you can kind of understand the top 8 seeds receiving byes, and then the 1 seed faces, you know, the 16v17. I don't know, man. This is a conjumbled mess. I really hope they don't do something like this. And I was in support of the college football playoff expanding. I thought it was the right thing to do. But March Madness, this would be the NCAA down really bad in terms of the regular season, just not generating good enough ratings, possibly, because this is their cash cow. It is March Madness, and the more games you put out, you eliminate the NIT, you would think that's more money, but is it enough to really change this format? I just don't think it is. And also, the other thing you have to take into account, there's a big narrative going around that college basketball, men's college basketball, just doesn't have any juice this year. And the main reason that is because there's no mainstream hype behind the college basketball season because there's no future NBA superstar or guaranteed future star driving the hype like a Zion Williamson. And you can see what's happening next year with Cooper Flagg on Duke. It's going to be huge. College basketball is going to be right back into the spotlight throughout the entirety of next season. Cooper Flagg and Ace Bradley, two of the top recruits who are probably better than any current college basketball player in terms of pro potential. Both of those players will be really good next year. They're going to get a ton of hype. So in terms of college basketball not receiving the hype this year, it's just based around there being no mainstream future NBA superstar this year. The number one overall player, Ron Holland, he went the pro route, I think, with the G League Ignite. And the other top players, there's just not, this is notably a really bad draft class in general, so I think that's the other reason why there's not a lot of hype surrounding it. But the idea of expanding the tournament, I understand how they would phrase this. They would be like, well, if we expand to 96 teams, if you're one of the best teams like the Dukes, like the North Carolinas, the Blue Bloods that normally are top 4, 5, 6 seeds anyways, you're not going to have to worry about playing in the extra first added round that we add on to it. It's not a situation to where if there's 96 teams, you're getting like a 1v16 matchup. Well, I guess in this scenario, it would be that I'm looking at right now. But in general, I think the other way would be what they would actually deploy. The first way I talked about, where you would have on-campus games. The teams 33 through 96 would have to play their way into the tournament of 64. And then you would get to 64 teams, and then it would be just kind of like a normal March Madness, but it would be an extra added on thing. Again, it's kind of like the college football playoff where you add on extra games and you're going to be making more money for sure because the games are very meaningful. You get into the tournament and you would also add on the whole idea of home court, which would also kind of make things a little bit more cool. But in general, this is completely different from the college football scenario because college football was dealing with an existential crisis to where their other New Year's Six games that weren't being played for championships, meaning the two playoff games, the other 4 New Year's Six games, we were seeing opt-outs, we were seeing problems to where players didn't care about them, and when the most meaningful games become meaningless, that's when you have to do some crazy stuff, and that's why they expanded it to the 12-team playoff. And I really had said they were going to expand 2.5, 3 years ago. I don't think this is going to happen. It just seems so unlikely. And also, again, this has been something that's been talked about for over a decade now, that they're going to expand it, and I saw it creep up, and I can't believe they actually talked about it, on TV yesterday, just out of the blue. But either way, it's not something I am expecting, but you do have to keep in the back of your mind in terms of money, and we know it is very motivating. It would make financial sense to have more meaningful games. That's just the reality of the situation. That's why we're seeing the rumors about college football already, going from 12 to 14, maybe to 16, because the more meaningful games you get, playoff-wise, the more ratings, the more amount of revenue you'll be able to generate for all those games. Imagine on-campus games, winner gets into the tournament. It's certainly something that would be enticing, but this is something that they've talked about for years and years and years, and I just don't see it happening right now. But either way, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.